Okay, so it's finally here. I pre-ordered this game at the beginning of April 2020 and then I upgraded to the Digital Deluxe Edition, which includes some stickers and a physical case. No game though, as I already have that digitally. I've followed this game since about mid-March, and as soon as that next payday hit, I did something a little out of the ordinary for me. I found myself dropping $29.99 on the pre-order. Now, normally I'm dead set against pre-orders as, well, you've seen in the AAA market so many games come out in broken and buggy states, missing sometimes entire sections of the game they advertise. Cyberpunk. But seeing as this was a small indie studio as opposed to a big corporate AAA titan, I took the risk, and seeing as it was only half the price of a normal release, I didn't see it as a big cost. So now I have the game in my hands after 10 months of waiting. Jeez, it's been 10 months since I pre-ordered that? It has flown, wishing my life away waiting for all this craziness to blow over, Especially seeing as 2K Battlegrounds came out a few months earlier and sort of underimpressed. It was fine as a game, but let's face it was no All-Stars. So some of you might not know what RetroMania Wrestling is. It's an arcade wrestling game made by RetroSoft Studios. The game has a lovely sprite-based aesthetic and looks really quite beautiful. The most stunning thing is that Mike, the main guy at RetroSoft Studios, and his team somehow managed to track down the rights holders from the Japanese studio Technos and managed to obtain the rights to their game, or at least make a sequel, so RetroMania is the spiritual successor to 1991's WrestleFest. The game does look very similar as to what I've seen of WrestleFest. The game itself looks fun, but sadly, as I wouldn't be born for roughly 7 years post WrestleFest, I never had the chance to play it. So the game in its current state on the day of release has 16 wrestlers to choose from, play as or beat down in the game. This might not seem like a lot compared to 2K games, but for an indie studio to sign some big names, it's very impressive. The roster consists of Road Warrior Hawk and Road Warrior Animal, the two WrestleFest champions from the 1991 game, Stevie Richards, Hollywood Nova and the Blue Meanie, the three Blue World Order alumni, ECW star Tommy Dreamer, Nick Aldis of NWA, Colt Cabana from AEW, John Morrison, formerly Johnny Nitro, of whom was titled Johnny Retro in this game, Nikita Koloff, Zack Sabre Jr. and Jeff Cobb from New Japan Pro Wrestling, Warhorse of Independent Wrestling TV, who has featured on AEW, and last but not least, Austin Idol. RetroSoft has announced 3 additional stars will come into the game soon in the form of DLC. First up is Chris Bay, a former one-time X Division champ currently signed with Impact Wrestling, with whom will be given out as free DLC. Next up is James Storm, again of Impact Wrestling fame. And lastly, Mr. Hughes, known for his time in the WWF but has been an independent wrestler since 1999. RetroMania has 4 different game modes, all of which offer a slightly different experience. You have the story mode, of which you play through the storyline as Johnny Retro. You meet up with the BWO and speak to Tommy Dreamer, who wants to bring you through the ranks of the House of Hardcore. You'll cross paths with several wrestlers. The game offers you decisions that will ultimately affect your attitude. You can try to be Mr. Nice Guy and be perceived as a face, or you can cut the shit, shoot from the hip and take no prisoners, making you a heel. You also have the 10 pounds of gold mode, which is a sort of gauntlet style mode where you choose a wrestler and fight through the wrestlers of RetroMania one by one to get a chance at the title. If you complete your run and get the belt, that wrestler is going to be the NWA champion next time you play. Then you have Retro Rumble, a game mode returning from the original game, just renamed, and it's basically your Royal Rumble game mode, to try to outlast everyone and be the last star in the ring. Last but not least, you have a versus mode, which is simply that. It's your exhibition mode for random matchups. You can plug in an extra controller or free and just duke it out. You have a fair selection of match types to choose from here too. Match types include singles matches, tag team matches, 6-man tag matches, 8-man tag matches, 3-way, triple threat, 4-way, and Retro Rumble. All of these have a few options too, such as elimination matches, option for steel cage, and tornado tag match types. RetroMania has a lot of arenas, many of which are wrestler-specific arenas. You have the RetroMania Arena, a school gym, the Ballroom, Japan, a warehouse, a beachside arena, the NWA's 70th anniversary arena, NWA Power, House of Hardcore, Stevie Richards Fitness, Universal Wrestling College, Pro Wrestling Tees, Major Wrestling Figure Podcast, which is an arena dedicated to the guys who do the podcast, Hell, which is Warhorse's unique arena, Stomp in Paradise, Too Many Games, a gaming convention, and British Arena for Zack Sabre Jr. and Nick Aldis. The gameplay of RetroMania is heavily arcade focused rather than the more simulation approach 2K take. The game relies on rather heavily on button mashing at certain points for pins and lockups. I'm still not fully 100% sure of the controls, so the tutorial only went over the basics, light attack, medium attack, strong attack, run, etc. So I have no idea how to reverse moves, although I have somehow pulled it off once or twice. I'll have to reach out to Mike about it maybe, but the controls are tight. The gameplay feels great, just with the controller I use I found myself getting cramp in my hands quite easily. That is a me problem though, not the fault of the game, as this is the controller I use. Said controller is the X91 from Hyperkin. It's been a great little controller for me mostly, but by god, I do not recommend this for this game unless you want to develop carpal tunnel. After losing the 10 pounds of gold mode, I switched to my backup controller, the Power A Fusion. Yeah, that'd be my only real criticism is the controls. Like, it shows you the basics, but I don't know how to Irish whip, how to drag, how to reverse, or how to pull off some pretty badass combos. I'd like to see a tutorial mode that guides you through everything, ideally that would be cool. The game relies heavily on caricatures of the stars, which I personally love. I think they all look very good, they all represent their significant stars well, and it looks very fitting to the whole aesthetic of the game. There are a few cutscenes that are animated. You will come across these at certain points in the story, but most of the game is told using these caricatures and text. This is fine. I appreciate this style of storytelling a lot more than 2K's attempts, as it doesn't require some less than stellar voice acting or wonky CGI or in-game rendered impersonations of stars. It's much simpler, the story seems to be oozing with creativity and personality in its dialogue, which has been missing from 2K games lately, and honestly has also been missing from the WWE as of late too. A lot of these stars are from the old WWF or early WWE, back when superstars weren't afraid to get a bit weird with it. Often with the promos, stars of those eras' cuts were often much more serious too, which is all but absent in modern WWE programming. I know there are other promotions separate from the WWE that do the whole promo thing and the booking, storytelling and general flow of the match much better, but still. As I wasn't even alive when most of these amazing storylines were taking place, or I was far too little to watch wrestling, I like to see these games and old pay-per-views and promos of that time period, as it interests me a lot. I'm aware that RetroMania has many wrestling stars that are still actively wrestling today, but it has a few wrestling greats. Of course, many of these stars are absent, such as Razor Ramon, Hollywood Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, British Bulldog, etc. The list goes on, but I believe this comes down to licensing issues, as many of these former wrestlers are still under contract with the WWE in their Hall of Fame. I could be way off, but the fact that a small indie studio has managed to get such a collection of big names to sign onto the game is pretty astonishing. Plus, I do appreciate games being made using the sprite design, as while I am no game developer, I can only imagine it's a little easier to fix graphical areas than with the hyper-realistic experiences that 2K strive for. Things like hair models and the like not working as intended, or stars missing key features of their face or attire are just hypothetical problems with games in this art style. I would love to see 2K just make a retro game in this vein. It doesn't have to be a big release like taking up one year's WWE 2K release window, but it could just be a little addition in the library midway through a year, but of course they won't do that because of profits. Each of the stars has their own entrances, each with their own retro interpretations of their entrance music. The music in this game is very well done and will definitely go down as one of the great retro soundtracks. The music was composed and recorded by a chap called Megaran, of whom was also featured heavily in a lot of the pre-release promo footage from the studio. I fully recommend RetroMania Wrestling, as for the price they are charging, there is more content here than some games that charge double its asking price. It's a game that has had a bit of a learning curve, but there is some arcadey fun to pass the time away. It will do wonders. The story mode is definitely worth experiencing, and the £10 of gold mode is definitely the thing with the replay value here. Honestly, Mike and team, you've done excellent work on this project, and I wish you and your studio well. I'm very excited to see what you bring to this game in terms of DLC, what future projects you decide to undertake. Regardless, I'm definitely a fan. Now you there, viewer, go give this game a shot. It's worth every penny. If you like wrestling games, you'll love this one. If you aren't, then I question why you've watched this far through the entire video. My only suggestion is to make a more in-depth tutorial teaching you a few more complex things. I'm hoping that 2K learns their lesson with 2K20, and I'm also hoping that AEW's game comes to Steam. I keep asking, but no one's saying shit about it. We also hit 300 subs earlier this month. Thank you guys, it's most appreciated, and more content is on its way, I promise you that. For all things retro, keep it right here at Papa's Go.